Right, well, we'll get underway. Welcome everybody, Hari and I just wanted to read a little Whakatauki to start off. Nehemia ka mohi moi a ahau, ko ahau anake. Nehemia ka mohi moi a tatou, ka tea I tatou. Means, if I dream alone. If we all dream together, we can succeed. Any apologies? Yeah, we've got Alistair. We'd like to move. Jeremy, seconder.
Yep.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thanks, carried. Any declarations of interest? No. The forums, I'm not aware of any of those. So the minutes. You don't have it. No, that's a bit of a trick there.
Yeah.
No extraordinary or urgent business. Any questions? Everyone's report. We don't have a report. Any other reports? No. Right, number 9, election of the deputy chair to the committee.
So as this is an inaugural meeting, and as determined by the inaugural meeting of council, at the inaugural meeting of committees, it is for the committee to elect the deputy chair.
Right, do we have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Lundoy.
Thank you. And a seconder for that. Thank you, Phil. Any other nominations? Okay, if there's no other nominations, it's clear Arlen will be deputy chair of the committee.
Thank you so much.
Right, so move on to item 1, proposed terms of reference.
So as per the point above, as being the inaugural meeting of this committee, it's appropriate for it to adopt a terms of reference. The terms of reference that have been attached to the item has been developed from both the former OPAC terms of reference, and actually are drawn predominantly from there, but also with reference to the terms of reference of a couple of other councils. We can look at those. I have also run these the proposed terms of reference by Bruce Robertson, given his former role as independent member and experience sitting on various audit and risk and broader finance and performance committees across the sector. So the recommendation is that you review the terms of reference, provide any input, and either adopt what's being proposed or amended, or if we're wildly off the ballpark and it needs a considerable override, which I'm hoping we're not going to have that conversation, that you adopt the terms of reference as drafted.
Any questions? But these are on page 6. We've got there in front of you. I note the name of the committee is the Finance and Performance Committee. Without each of those equally important. In fact, in some ways, the performance side of it is not more important, but something that we need to keep in mind. And that includes financial and non-financial performance. Anybody got any comments on any of those or suggestions for alteration, Linda?
I'll reinforce your comments, actually, Chairman. And I think that number 2 covers off most of that. As far as the terms of reference, the performance of council and bullet points covers off both the financial and the many other strategic outcomes as well. So I think I'm happy with the terms of reference, having worked with most of them. And
a little bit about the overlap, potential overlap between this committee and the risk committee. I'm not sure if I understand that fully, but could you help us in that area, Amy?
Sure. Notwithstanding that, I think this is about the lens that you apply when you're considering matters. So notwithstanding that, this committee and the Risk and Assurance Committee will be looking at similar things. So if, for example, if we take our council controlled organisations, for example, because I'll probably argue that there's a third committee that's involved in that, which would be the Strategy Committee. So when we are determining or working with those council controlled organisations around their statement of intents, I would be thinking, and I might be speaking wild out of turn, and I'm hoping I am not, but I'm thinking that that would be a matter for consideration by the committee that deals with strategy matters. Then from a performance point of view, in terms of, once they have their statement of intent, how they're progressing against the statement of intent, that would be a conversation for the Finance and Performance Committee meeting. But also I'd be thinking that the Risk and Assurance Committee would be wanting to talk to members of those council controlled organisations to understand what the strategic risks are for those organisations, how they impact us, and what is being done to manage and mitigate those. So just getting that focus there.
Thank you, Amy. Nicol was hit by his hand up. Nicol?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm reasonably happy with the terms of reference, and I guess so. We're not restricted. That I think there's an understandable almost overlap between those two committees, but I think that's healthy to have. When we decided to split them, it was very much along the lines that the performance targets we set and our budgets we set that is the responsibility of council. That would fall outside the independent chair role of the other committee. So while there may appear to be a little bit of double up, I think it's there for good reason, so that we're not suddenly find we can't talk about something we need to.
Okay, thank you, Lyndall.
Yeah, sorry to have another go. It just occurred to me though, and it's a genuine question, whether we need to actually write in our terms of reference that any matters of concern would go direct to the Risk and Assurance Committee, because the two committees need to talk to each other in some form. So your advice on whether we actually need to say that, Amy, or
I don't know what the
or is
rule-
it assumed?
So if I might, Mr. in response to that, I would have thought it might be more appropriate for this committee to take that to council, to make a decision on how best to respond to a potential risk that seems to be emerging. Would it? Otherwise, you get one committee tasking another committee.
Yeah.
Actually, through YouTube, but I do think actually that in terms of my experience of, shall I say, other committees, is that not that you do it all the time, but there have been recommendations that this, we recommend that this item or this issue is referred to the whatever committee for further review or specific action.
So do you think that ability needs to be mentioned in the terms of reference here or not?
Look, I don't know the answer to the question and the actual best practice around what terms of reference looks like. I am very happy to take an action to explore that, and with your, if you are happy to either have it in or out, depending on what best practice was, I can come back to you on it. And you can either agree to accept the terms of reference with it in or out. If you have a strong view, we can put it in. It might be something as, the committee will refer risk and strategic matters to the appropriate committees as it sees fit. I technically would argue though that it's potentially implicit in all of the work you do in all of the committees, and I don't know it's so referenced in the other terms of references.
That's my question, because I wasn't sure whether it was implied anyway.
The reality is that any risk, any issues or anything goes from any committee, any council, like the reserve, regional, in every terms, or if we did, should be in every probably committees, so
Yeah.
it's all got to go to the risk, because then they deal with it and work out the assessment, because that's the committee that deals with that. And they progress it through to council. But I'm again, just going back, I'm pretty happy with all these things that Tani has. I think it's got plenty of the things there to keep Tani entertained. To be reported.
Nicole, yeah, Nicole. You just like your sound, I think.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say another example where things could go to multiple committees would be, as that's to do with resilience. It may well go to regional services first, but if it was a risk, it would also be picked up by the risk committee. And if it was the drought type things we're looking at, depending which the first committee is coming up, it may well go to council. So I think I'm reasonably comfortable with cover, but I'm comfortable for Amy to go and have a look to make sure. But really, all these committees they're not a whole, so the final decisions do end up before council. So that's good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've had a very good discussion about that. Is somebody having to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to move.
Jeremy? Well, right, all those in favour of the recommendation, there's 3 points there in it. Say aye. Yes, carry. Thank you. Item 2, the annual activity plan.
Me again. So as this is a new committee, again, just taking the opportunity to outline for you the types of reports that we previously reported through to the OPAC committee on matters germane to the terms of reference, and which we are proposing to report to you on going forwards along with the frequency. In subsequent meetings, we'll be able to provide a more detailed version of this, because we'll have the specific meeting dates that we're actually able to map the reporting out against. So again, this is for noting for your review and any feedback that you might have.
Thank you. Any feedback? Well,
Just a question really is in respect of the council controlled organisations, which in terms of reference suggests we have an opportunity for, what's their sort of reporting to council sort of frequency and detail? Do they do that annually in terms of sharing how they're tracking, or do they do that on a quarterly basis?
So there's some set pieces, I guess, in terms of statutory reporting, in terms of the statement of intent. Do they do an annual plan as well, team, or is it just the statement of intent and the annual report? Yeah, so depending on those reporting periods, that's when they fall in. However, I would like to suggest that, certainly that council takes an interest in the role of its CCOs, and certainly within the risk committee, I'm proposing that, or we propose that we get the CEOs to come in and talk to us specifically about risks at those committees. But I think it's an opportunity either around the timing of the reporting, always good to have that conversation, or at other times that may be so pertinent to have them come in and talk to us about the work they're doing and how they're tracking.
anybody else? Jeremy?
Just a question around the fund managers update. Tony might be able to, like it's annually, but I did wonder whether, just even looking whether it could have been every 6 months, like a couple of times, just to, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there because there's a lot going on in the world. And sometimes it's good to, I take it doesn't cost us anything, but part of their service. But it's just to know what the markets are doing, just to get a feel, because it seems what can happen in a year.
So,
I don't know.
defer to Tony on that, just noting that we do report quarterly, and as part of the investment report, there is some commentary from our fund managers that Tony provides that outlines, their general view. But Tony, do you have a view on whether it would be appropriate for them to?
Just to clarify, so this is when they turn up and having
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'll ask the question.
Look, we're happy to provide the council one. I would suggest one physical meeting, one Zoom meeting, if you feel that that's appropriate to have two people. There's no cost to us, and they do like to keep in touch with the client. And they can sometimes be quite detailed reports. Maybe Bruce Robertson could summarise. There's an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, that's what I sometimes it's good.
Totally at the direction of.
I'm happy with it, but I'm just not having. Might be us to work. Let's go. I just think we're in an interesting environment and around the world, and we've got money out there, and just them in the room or even a Zoom to ask a few questions, we give them the confidence.
I'm supposed to put it in the bottom drawer and forget about it.
Yeah.
So given, Mr. Chair, given this is a new committee, and given this is, the first time I'll be running this one, I think it looks pretty sound. Just maybe we just want to make sure that within a year's time, maybe at this time next year or 12 months after we've been through one cycle, we perhaps be prepared to have a review of that, or that naturally occur every 12 months anyway.
Look, I just think there's an opportunity. We're keen to learn and make sure that learn as we go, and make sure in the spirit of continuous improvement that we're bringing items to the committee that are topical and germane. And there's often things that crop up during the year that maybe pertinent to be reporting on. So certainly at some point in life there might be some climate change reporting that we're going to need to be doing, which so nothing's set in stone. It's a start of 10, so happy to accept feedback during the year as well.
Nicole?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think if we can review more often, but I think in getting reports is good, but the review of the SIPO is the thing. If we had concerns, you'd do it that way. Otherwise, there's probably a risk of trying to micromanage the job we've actually put out. If next time we review it or we think we need to change the settings, then that's probably the better way of actually doing it. So I'm reasonably comfortable with the triannually, but obviously we can change that at any time if we had a real concern that we could actually say, look, yeah, we want to have a discussion about the SIPO percentages, which we've already tweaked once since we set it up.
Lyndall?
That's exactly what I was going to say. If we needed to review the SIPO, then getting more detail on our investment funding would be the time to do that. So absolutely endorse what the Chairman Horola said.
I'll have it moved and as out.
Okay, so
Second.
recommendation, those 2 points there, we note the plan and we reviewed it, we provide feedback. We got a mover from Jeremy, a second to Lyndall, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, now item 3, the long-term plan progress report. Rachel?
Through the chair, this is the first quarterly progress report on the long-term plan for this financial year. So we give this every 3 months, and essentially it reports on the levels of service, performance measures and targets to indicate how we're getting on with those. This first quarterly, thank you. This first progress report highlights that we're largely on track, and as you will have seen in the table included in the items, some big milestones have been ticked off during the quarter. So in particular, for water and land, we've had the regional forum report come through on the 13th of July. A bit of activity in the climate resilience space, the assessment of the degree and impact of contamination at Tenwai Point was completed, and the annual report for last year was adopted. So those were some of the big milestones. Just for the new councillors' benefit, we have a traffic bike system in terms of whether we're on track with our targets or not. So They are around the level of confidence that we will achieve the particular target by year-end, with red being fairly low confidence. Orange, still some confidence, but not 100%, and green, high levels of confidence. And you'll see that there were a small handful of oranges and reds. They, as indicated in the item, relate to pieces of work where the original timeframes have moved after the long-term plan, in some cases due to changes with central government legislation, etc. So really happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we have any questions? Rachel, perhaps you might like to maybe look at the red ones and tell us if there's any sort of, I know one of them was an administrative thing, which is sort of done and dusted now, I can't think about that, but some of the others, would you like to elaborate on those more as to whether there's a real risk that we won't achieve them, or whether, you know, we're like, I know they're red for a reason, but you know, we might have less concern about them if that's likely to happen later in the year.
So yeah, the reds are where we've got a fairly low level of confidence, and as you to turn to page 31 of your agenda, 15 is the review of the regional policy statement to ensure consideration of climate change implications. So with the review of the regional policy statement, we've moved the time frame for that review because of the fact that the national planning standards will not be out until 2024. So we continue to have a fairly low confidence that we would actually achieve that particular target. And what we are currently looking into at the moment is whether we can actually legally change the targets in this type of situation, because it seems a bit of a nonsense that we've got a target that's now outdated.
Okay.
It's going past the high, medium, low. Does medium go, well, it's 50-50? You know, like it, but
That's
yes.
Is there a question, John?
No, I was just clarification on that. Sorry.
No?
But it's going to, essentially what you're saying, Rachel, is that even though it's red, there is not necessarily a high level of risk that is associated with a red traffic light in this instance because of a shift in national.
It's just a shift in timelines to align with national timelines. And as I say, we are looking into whether in these instances where you can actually change the targets, because it's a wee bit nonsensical.
And nor did you have something?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would be wondering about is how many of the ambers we are going to be able to shift into green, or reds to ambers even, but given that some of the reds are out of our control because it's not our thing. So any opportunity to maybe see where we're shifting some of those ambers to green for the next quarter?
Absolutely. So one of those, for example, was the freshwater accounting system. And so the team have been doing quite a bit of work in that space. So we should be able to report to the next meeting how we're getting on with the target for this year. And whether that's changed from orange to green, which would certainly be the intent. I don't know if you'd like to comment on the projects, which is another amber.
Yeah, 19.1, which if you cast your mind back, I think that was red for a while. So we've got it to amber. It's on amber on the basis that we've got some items to tidy up on the goal project, but actually I'm pretty confident, given that we've got an agreement with Kano around the rescheduling of some of these projects, that would actually be green by the end of the year as well. So that's one where I'm pretty confident that we'll go from amber to green.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the one I'm looking at is probably the air quality one, which is all green. And after fielding media comments earlier in the year from a five-year-old report saying that Invercargill was the most dangerous place to live, but I'm assuming our own reporting is showing quite a bit different. I know we have talked about revisiting the loan scheme and perhaps getting more stringent around the replacement of burners, but the colour scheme appears to read that we're on track for that. Is that right, Rachel?
Yes, I believe that's a fair comment, Chair, and that our own monitoring and remembering that the Happens report was using data from back in 2016 from memory. Our own data showing some positive trends, and we'll be very happy to bring that information through to strategy and policy next year. In terms of the home heating scheme review, that has been progressing since the council workshop on the 13th of July. We've had a new air quality scientist just come on board, and so we're planning a follow-up session on that early in the new year.
Thank you, Nicole. I actually had a question about that as well, and I wondered whether or not the performance measure was the right one. It is, but the question is that the performance measure should perhaps be, you know, that we have no exceedances of the national standard. Is that somewhere else? Or, because we're allowed one or two, aren't we? Or how many are we allowed now?
So these have been developed through the 2021-31 long-term plan process, and are reasonably locked in now. We can review whether the targets and measures are appropriate when we develop up the long-term plan for 2024 to 34. But you're right in that there isn't a target, or the targets aren't specifically around whether we achieve the standards, about whether our plans and monitoring are compliant.
So should they be, and if so, should we change them?
In some cases, and this applies in other portfolios as well, the focus has been on what we can ourselves control. So obviously we can control whether our plan's compliant, we can control whether our monitoring and reporting is compliant. Not everything to do with equality is within our control, so that's why those types of measures aren't in this long-term plan.
I remember talking about that before when I was on the council before. Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that although our exceedances have reduced for the first time in a long time, we're still having exceedances, which is not okay.
I know,
Actually.
it depends a lot on the weather, but it also depends on how many smoky chimneys we've got as well.
Some quite interesting options in the paper that's been prepared for you in this space, relating to all those different areas. So we're looking forward to discussing that with you.
Oh, okay, all right. So we're going to be looking at that next year. All right, thank you, Rachel. Any other questions?
The recommendation.
Oh, sorry, I had one too, which is actually of a similar nature. It's under the biosecurity and biodiversity. On page 28. So we've got once again the performance measures that we've got the programs in place. We've got the PCA, the Possum Control Area, appears to be working okay. But you know, we've just had an expansion of the UND area, and we've had to change our coastal land because of the sea squirt. So once again, is the measure there, rather than being a program put in place, perhaps that the area is contained to one area rather than being spread. I know some things, once again, is a thing that's perhaps a little out of our control. Same sort of question.
A similar approach, Chair, that we've used to develop these performance targets, but we can definitely review whether that is still the most appropriate approach as part of the long-term plan development process.
Nicole, you got anything else?
No, not at the moment. I think we appear to be sort of reasonably on track, and as Rachel was saying, some of these other issues we're going to deal with through workshops, etc. Anyway, so all good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Rachel. So we've got a recommendation to note that report.
I'll move that, Chair.
And seconded, Phil. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Right. financial report. No, we've sort of taken this as read, but if there are some things you'd like to highlight, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. I thought for the first meeting of the new council and the new committee members that I might perhaps explain some things, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be good.
The other thing I'd like to say, Chair, is that it's now 2 years exactly since we developed this format, the quarterly reporting and the reports that you see in front of you. That was after workshopping with the past council as to what we could provide that would be useful to them. We are open to any suggestions going forward once the new council settle in, if they would wish to alter or fine tune the reporting. And we could certainly bring some suggestions as well. Everything's, I think, part of a continuous improvement program is what I'm saying. So I'll try not to labour it, but I'll point out the things that you might like to look at on an ongoing basis. So we'll start with page 48. It's the revenue and expense statement, once called a profit and loss. And it's in 3 pieces. The first piece is our business as usual. It's our operating, partway down the page, it's called operating surplus deficit. And that is the result of council's normal business, the business of being a council effectively. The middle section under the heading investment income details their income that we don't necessarily control from dividends, from interest and from our portfolio. So we've separated that out. And the third section is government funded projects, which is new in the last 2 years for us. And it covers off Jobs for Nature and our climate resilience funding and expenditure. So what I tend to do in the summary, the preceding pages, is just note any material variances to budget in those 3 areas and whether or not we see them as being something that will impact the end of year result. The first quarter, there's always very little change to budget. It's a quieter period, if you like, for council. A lot of our activities happen in that second and third quarter. And you'll see that in the budgeting as we go through. So just in summary then, that operating surplus deficit, in the third column and the variance column, we have F's and U's, favourable and unfavourable, good or bad. The ones in red are the unfavourable ones, which means we're either overspent or under income. It says 98 favourable, so we're 98,000 ahead of budget at the end of the first quarter. So given that we've turned over $10 million in that period, that's pretty much, you can read that as a rounding, and you say that we're on track at that point. Investment income is showing 147,000 favourable. And the benefit there is income from investments realised. So I'll just help you with the definitions. We use the word realised as in received real income, dividends or interest received into the portfolio. The unrealised piece is the movement in the market value of the portfolio, and which we have no control. So that's got a red on it. So in this period, it went down 44,000, which is again insignificant on 28 million. And just to warn those new to the committee, the portfolio goes up and down, can be $1 million a month in a very volatile situation. So 44,000 over a quarter is actually a really good result. And the last section, government funded projects, we had for the quarter a budget of $2.2 million of income, and that revenue is wholly government revenue, and we received 438. That is not a concern. Well, it might look like it. I said in the notes, it's a timing difference. We're waiting for Kanoa to sign off some variations. Since signed those, or they have, we have. We've sent them a $3 million invoice So that will come back on track as we go ahead. And hence the reason for the red ink on that one, and expenditure there. The expenditure in this report is the report is jobs for nature expenditure, and you'll see that that's nearly exactly on track. Before I go on, Chair, was there any questions from this page? Is the explanation okay, not too laborious?
Yeah, really good.
Statement of financial position, page 49, once called a balance sheet. I won't say there's nothing to see here, but it's reasonably static, our balance sheet. The only movement you'll see in it is when we're buying assets, investing in things, or there's a movement in the line there called managed funds, which is at the end of September, 26.7 million. You might note that the same time the previous year it was 29 million. So over 12 months, the portfolio has decreased 2.3 million. It lists out our other investments, property, plant and equipment, sundry investments, current liabilities, which is our liability to our creditors, employee entitlements, and other things. So, as I say, you won't see a lot happening there. Now, I will point out that cash and deposits at the 30th September were 943,000. I think it's the other day it was 18.5 million. We'll talk about that when we get to the cash flow report, the monthly cash flow report. So moving on, page 50, statement of cash flows.
Before we go, I guess for principal Bill's purpose, benefit the subsidiary is to the Southport shares. We didn't talk about why it's called subsidiary, but it's actually refers to Southport.
Yes, it does, Chair.
Shares are, perhaps you can explain.
The shares at the original cost, 1990 or 1987, I'm not quite sure exactly. We hold them at cost in our balance sheet, as do many regional councils. I explained to the Chair one of the reasons for not putting them in at market value is that we would be required then to account for the movement in market value from year to year. That, I believe, reason from the previous GM not doing this is that movement each year could be quite substantial, and it would confuse their ratepayers as to the availability of actual funds because it's not cash. We're happy and the auditors are happy for us to carry them at cost.
Right, thanks. Nicole, and then Jeremy.
Yeah, so I'm not sure it's actually at cost because I think we were gifted them, but they've set at $1 a share for the very reasons that Tony has been outlining, that it would actually mess up your books quite a bit with fluctuations all the time. So the dollars on the book equate to the number of shares, and at times you can almost put 10 times that value on them. We're getting close at times, but for accountancy purposes, that's why we've done it. I think it's, I don't think you'd want to change it.
Jeremy, thanks.
The question around the employee entitlements, do I see that as quite a lift? Is that like same time last year? Obviously it's,
So two parts to that, Councillor. There's yes, I think you'll find the underlying employee entitlements is 1.7, 1.8. There's an accrual in there also for staff remuneration at the balance date of 30th September. It's just where the payroll ends. But it's not as significant as it looks, and I think on the 31st of December you'll see it'll be closer to normal.
Does that relate to long service leave or accrued leave that people?
All leaves, Chair.
We have a policy to discourage too much accumulation.
We do. There are 200 total staff. And we're constantly keeping aware, abreast of their leave. It was probably more of a challenge during COVID times when people couldn't take leave. We find over the summer, we're hoping that will continue to come down, but
Through you, just to explain how we manage leave. HR has an active role in this, and works closely with payroll on that. So we get quarterly reports of leave outstanding, and we work on a one-on-one basis with the managers to identify those individuals with high leave balances and make sure that they have a plan in place. So, not only is it a liability on the health on the system, but it's also a health and safety liability as well that we look to actively manage. And it had been a feature of audit reports historically, and just before COVID, we were making good progress in terms of it was not a matter that reached audit, but unfortunately we're back there. So COVID notwithstanding, we're trying to make sure that we get people into really good habits about how we can manage their well-being.
Thank you. Rob? You have something?
No.
Oh, sorry. Nick?
Yes, well, I think Tani's pretty much covered it. It's a good thing to have there because the auditors always told us that if somebody wouldn't take any holidays, maybe they were doing something they wanted to hide. But there's got to be a little bit of flexibility if somebody was going for an extended holiday for a couple of years. But it is an item we've encouraged. We've tried to keep staff not to accrue. But that's what it's there for, really. It's leave that hasn't been taken.
Okay, thank you. Tanya, what else have you got there for us?
Well, if you're happy, Chair, I could move on to the monthly cash flow report, page 51. And perhaps we just focus on the graph, page 53, which tells us the story really without needing to go through the numbers. The numbers, if you're interested, again, reflect normal operating cash and dividend income, and again, government funded. So that's the details there for you. But this is effectively the outcome, and that we started the year with $6.3 million. Not all of which was ours. We hold funds on behalf of, so we can have revenue in advance. We can have Waituna Trust funds held. We normally spend that down going into overdraft during the winter time, from April to July, August, and in October, the funds for rates come in, or start to come in, and peak in November, December. And then we run the same story back down to April again. So we, as per this, we're looking to go back down negative in April next year. And within that expenditure, I've listed there this year's investments into climate resilience projects, or net investments after the Kānoa contribution. If we were to follow that graph, you would see a similar pattern next year, but the bottom will come in at 17 million. So we won't be funding it through the bank. That will be topped up through our LGFA credit facility. We do intend to take advantage of the fact that we have substantial funds for some time. So we're currently investing at 4.5% on call, which is phenomenal. This time last year, we were struggling to get 1%. Saying that, of course, the other side is that when we do get into the other side of the equation, it is somewhat higher than budget. Well, a bit higher than budget, definitely. So, any questions, Chair, before I hop on?
Yes.
Obviously, in regards to the cruise ship, I can't remember cruise trips coming around.
We had a small budget for cruise ship. We have achieved that, and I think also in the next 2 months we'll see.
So we've already achieved the budget. Yeah, so it's obviously possible to make millions, but it could actually.
We're all waiting to see what it is going to be. Yeah. So that's not reflected here yet. Yeah.
It can only be applied to certain projects anyway.
Absolutely, and it is all, of course, as per the deed. Coastal.
Sorry.
So page 54 highlights the split between climate resilience and biodiversity. The climate resilience section there shows 6.6 coming from the government this year, full year budget, and 10 million from the council as our contribution. A total expenditure expected of 16.66 million. We've spent September, I should say, 1.2 million. And the biodiversity projects, or jobs for nature, as we tend to call them, government income of 4 million, contribution from council of 557,000, total expenditure expected of 4.6 million. But you can see between these two projects or groups of projects, there are in fact $20 million of expenditure this year, which is 50% of our normal expenditure. It's quite significant projects and requiring significant resource to manage and monitor. And that's why we've pulled them out here for you to see separately. Underneath that, we list off the sundry other capital expenditure and not so sundry. There's a building item there that was in the annual plan. It's unlikely, it's very unlikely that it'll be spent in this financial year. I look at the CE. No. And at the very bottom, we have major project expenditure, coastal plan. So this is expenditure since the inception of the project. Coastal plan, 2.8 million, people, water and land, 5.6 million, and proposed water and land plan, 14 million. And some of that, as you can see, is over 10 years. Significant expenditure still. Page 55. Quite a detailed report, but one that was requested from several committee previously. Sorry.
I'm just going to ask a question about buildings and what we're going through. This will just resets my memory and everything. When we sold our building, would that just have gone into the general sort of into these funding?
No, it was put into general fund.
Just making
That buildings there that says general, that's actually two separate items. It's something like 1.6 for this building. Doing this from memory. And the balance of 365 was for leasehold buildings on the farms for potential upgrading of those properties. And as planned, it's not yet committed. The debtors report outlines where our sundry debtors, so non-rates debtors, consent debtors and compliance debtors particularly, where that sits, or any other debtors where we might have charged out an invoice to government that we're waiting on. The key number there is the overdue balance. That's the one the council committee used to like to look at, and particularly the 90-day balance. We have been working in chipping away as we should at that amount, working with the debtors and with the debt collection agency. I think 2 years ago now, council moved debt collection to a company called Debt Management Central. It is a LAS, a local authority owned service, out of Horizons Regional Council. It now collects debt for 20 different councils, and they specialise in rates debt and the kind of debt that we have. So they're providing us a good service. And of course, our team are always bringing people to come to arrangement to get the debt paid. The rates debt, you could expect with the rate increase we had last year might have gone up, and you know, it has. We're seeing here $1.2 million of debt. Further down the page there at the 30th of September, it is 5% of the total amount invoiced. So the percentages stay the same, the numbers are higher. We will be sending overdue notices in January to those who were late in November. We're continually encouraging people to go to direct debit. As we say here, we've been successful. We've got, was it 14% now on direct debit? Certainly helps us and we hope helps the ratepayer. That direct debit is split evenly between those who are paying 3 payments now and those who are paying 1. It has become more popular, as you can imagine, and will continue to. Any questions, Chair, before I? No?
Yeah, that's right. We talked a bit about splitting it up into 4 payments like the district councils do. But I understand that would result in a bit of a cash flow problem. Is that right?
Yes, we wouldn't have that peak. Our debt would become higher because our cash would be lower. We would be reluctant to encourage council to invoice quarterly like TAs. Our average invoice is still so low, the administrative burden would outweigh the benefit. By allowing ratepayers to pay across the year without penalty is equivalent to, we think. We have had more comment this time than I've noticed before about the fact that the date of payment is the same as the other councils. Some people finding that hard. It was deliberately done, I believe, in the past by the previous GM to allow the administration by the ratepayer to say, well, I've got to pay 2 and once we pay these together. Some people are suggesting that actually isn't ideal. So not a lot of movement towards Christmas, so it would be backwards if we were to consider it.
You're not actively thinking about doing that, really.
Lots of things to consider before that, but we'll see. I would like us to be more and continue to be more proactive on allowing it to be easier for ratepayers to pay, both physically and through the systems. We're almost like a bank where people are wanting to know their balance and to be able to bring a digital solution to them. And we are, our IT team are doing a really good job with facilities there. I think we had 3,500 people pay through our new portal. So those kind of services make it easier for people to know where they're at and to help with their payments. The Clean Air Loan Quarterly Report is a historic report. We have an agreement still in force with 2 councils, the Gore District Council and the Cargill City Council, where we have made available $2 million of funding, then gone into ratepayers to provide clean air burners, if you can call them that. It started, I think, in 2016. It's currently under review now as to its further effectiveness, and whether it's got future life. It's been complexed by the more recent Consumer Credit Contract Act. But currently this, as you can see there, only $73,000 owing to us. And most quarters now there is no change. It's been like that for some time. I think we've talked about this at previous meetings, and that there's a significant amount of work going on in the strategy team and coming through Stratton Pole. And the last piece of this report, all coloured diagrams and charts, last part of my report, I won't take too much of the time, is a combination of performance and finances. This was the result of the committee 2 years ago wanting to understand how the timing of our budgets was relating to the timing of our achievements. The first page highlights the whole council result. The circle, you learn to perhaps maybe choose to look at it, tells us about where we are with our spend, relative to the quarter. So it's saying that we've spent 21%, which isn't too bad for a 25% of the way through the year, and it gives us a brief look at that. The bar charts tell us where we are roughly with budget, and without having to look at the numbers, you can see that they're pretty close, as we said. And then underneath the levels of service is a summary of what Rachel's gone through in detail, a snapshot of all 56 levels of service. You can see. So the total length of the green is the numbers of green that we have. The total number of red is the numbers in red. And the purpose of that is to allow you to say, right, I want to dig into the reds or the ambers. Underneath that, and I won't go through each one, there are 6 portfolios. each portfolio report is the same. It talks about how much spend has been in that portfolio. For example, here we've spent 23% of the budget. The middle graphs in this table talk to the activities within council which are part of that portfolio. So policy and planning and science are two of the parts of council that are contributing to this portfolio. And you can see there that their budget. And then underneath the 4 green bars tells us that there's 4 levels of service and we've high confidence of achieving each. If you fast forward and look through all the portfolios, you'll be able to familiarise yourself with that. And probably one of the more, I look at a regional leadership, page 62. People might say, what is regional leadership? There are 8 activities of council contributing to that activity, starting from community engagement through to catchment integration. And you can see their relative spend or the activity within regional leadership. There are 16 levels of service in that group and 14 green and 2 red. So it's a report that's, I feel, is worth studying, and I'm happy for you to come back in the future and comment on how valuable you find it. And that here is the finance report. That'll be the long version. Next time we'll take it as read.
Thank you, Tanya. Jeremy.
Just a technical question, is anybody else's fuzzy?
Yeah.
Those-
Yeah.
that is
Printed version, that's
summarised.
too.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
So does your-
The last one's clear, but
Yeah, no, with apologies, it has been raised and we're looking to find a systematic way of resolving these issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure why this time that happened.
But it happened in some other committee too, actually.
Yeah, so yeah, sometimes when the PDFs. Sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Tanya, for going through all of that. That's very good, very interesting report. And I think those graphs, once the fuzziness gets fixed, will be, they sort of see everything at a glance and look at the revenue versus the actual and budget, and same on the expense side, and those little green or orange bars at the bottom give us an idea of the performance. So you've got the finances and the performance sort of tied together. So I think they look really good. Anybody else like to comment? Nicole, have you got any other comments?
No, I'm pretty happy. Do you want me to move the recommendation?
All right, thank you. Seconder. Jeremy? Jeremy, and all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thanks very much, Tanya. Investment report, it's item 5.
Yeah, thank you. So I will not labour through this one, but except to say that we do have 26.7 million as at the 30th of September. The numbers are negative, they've got brackets around them and have had for some months as affected by Councillor McPhail. The market has changed, and 12 months ago we gained $3 million in the portfolio. Post that event, we've now moved backwards $2.3 million. The nature of the portfolio is what they call a balanced portfolio, 50% invested in bonds and direct investment with government bonds and with large corporate bonds, and 50% in a mixed portfolio where JB Ware have invested us directly in everything from Costco to, yes, let's have a look at the list. It is a proper list of environmentally sustainable companies, through to mutual funds where we might have an index fund and a a European country or an Asian country or somewhere where they believe is appropriate. Now, they spend day and night managing that, keeping track of that worldwide. A very reputable firm with JB Weir, actually part of the National Australian Bank, so a substantial corporation themselves. We monitor their results against the market, and I've done it twice this year for the fact that we do have negatives around them, and we're looking at and they've ranked either 4th or 5th out of 30. The question was asked, why aren't they number one? Well, you can't always pick a winner. But look, they're close to the top, and we're happy with their efforts and we're happy with their communication. The reality is the market has changed, and as the chair said, it's for us to decide if we want to stay 50-50 in the future, and that's part of a review we're going to do next year. But this graph here, I think, would tell us all is that in 12 months, 10 of the months have been negative. So the red is the movement in value of the portfolio, the market value. The blue reflects the income, the interest and dividends received that month. So they will always be above the line. Very different graph to 12 months ago, where every month was a positive. So the balanced portfolio, as I said, the purpose of it is to ride out the gains and losses. So in theory, a diversified portfolio, when one is up, one's up when the other one's down, vice versa. We had a period of time at the beginning of this year where they were both down, when interest rates was escalating quite dramatically. It caused the market value of the bonds to go down while the market value of the shares went down. And I wrote quite as Bruce Robertson said, a fulsome paper at the time explaining that bonds don't go down in value. You still get the capital value when you cash them in. They have a market value that moves in between. So if you've got a $10 million investment, you've still got a $10 million investment when you cash it back. So I'm just encouraging people not to be too concerned about the market value of their bonds, because I think with JB we're invested in a very good bond portfolio. And on the other side of that, as interest rates are going up, what we expected might have only been a 2% return from our portfolio based around previous interest rates. It's already sitting over 3% and will go up. The bond market they're investing in now is showing 5% and 6% returns. I'm not saying everything's hunky-dory in the world. I'm saying we're doing the best we can with the portfolio we have with very good managers. And the rest of it is up to the market just at the minute.
Jeremy?
I was just going to make a comment in regards to obviously looking, you'd almost go, I think, what was their budget? Was it 4.5% or something, or like a long term?
4%, including 2% income, 2% giving.
But you almost go, well, you could lock in money in longer term in a deposit side of things instead of risking it out on the capital.
So
But I was going to make the other point that we're in the inflationary era, that our money is devaluing by 7% out there or whatever the inflation value. So you're in a negative scenario because the cost of what we're using some of that money for costs a lot more. And so it's an interesting game to be in. You could be really scared and put money under the bed, but it's actually losing money seriously too. The risk of that too, the value of it.
yes, can't say there's an ideal solution. I've had a number of discussions with JB Weir about this, and of course they have an interest in us keeping the portfolio invested, but they also have reputation as genuine fund managers. Prior to 2016, the council was invested 75% in debt or bonds and 25% in the market at a time when interest rates were 8% and above. 75-25 was the investment, and council reviewed that through a SIPO investment review that the chair's been on. And it's 50-50 now, and it would require us to review that next year to change it. As to the inflation impact, shares do okay in an inflationary environment if you're invested in the right companies, and I spent quite a bit of time looking at this. If you're invested in companies that are part of the general economy, the income, the profit and the value go up with inflation. And that is why shares can be an inflation hedge. So there are, and this is a good question we can ask again of our investment managers rather than just myself, but they consider all those things when they make recommendations as to what type of companies to be invested in during inflation. Whether we should have it in the market or whether we should be spending it ourselves, that's a question for our investment review. It's a good question, and we should always ask these questions.
Thank you, Talia. Nicole?
Yes, I guess I was one of the ones who was a wee bit more cautious when we went to the 50%, but over time it has performed pretty well. Obviously, we'll keep watching it. If most of those shares, that money it's got a long window sort of thing, and the difficulty is if you suddenly change it in this environment, you lock it, unrealized gains or losses become real. So obviously we keep monitoring it, but at the moment I've got a reasonable degree of comfort that these guys are performing. I mean, if they're at the top of the market, they'd be high risk, but if they're in the top 3 or 4, I'm reasonably comfortable. But as you say, Jimmy, we've got to keep watching it. But yeah, when you've got that sort of portfolio for long time disaster things, then the bulk of it we're not going to spend tomorrow or next year or the year after. So it does suit that sort of balanced portfolio if you've got a good operator.
Thank you, Nicole. Lyndall, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm just, my eyes popped out of my head when you said Costco, because I'm wondering how I wouldn't have thought that was a suitable company for us to be investing in, but is it a sustainable environmentally?
The portfolio is managed under those guidelines.
Wow.
There are 2 or 3 other.
Well, they're certainly supporting production of waste. But anyway.
It's an interesting observation, and if I listed off all the companies we're involved in, we can probably debate all of them.
Absolutely.
That's it. You know, if I could have said palm olive, for example, they're invested in what we would call the necessities, and then the part of the industry where there's high volume, they call fast moving consumer goods. So that's a small part of our portfolio. It wouldn't be a large part, but it's just one piece. And I use that as an example of where they're looking to inflation hedge. But they're definitely aware of our requirements around the sustainable portfolio.
So we don't have shares in fossil fuel companies then, like that, or do we?
We don't have shares in fossil fuel companies.
Arms dealers. Good.
Right, thank you. Anything else? Investment report.
I'm happy to move that.
Thanks, Jeremy. Seconder. Phil, thanks, Phil. So we note the investment report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thanks, Gary. Thanks again, Tanya. And finally, item 6.
Good afternoon.
Presenting the information management update. Paula is part of this report, and she is waving to us from home. So welcome, Paula, and she's available for any questions. So fabulous news to report is that the IM strategy has been adopted, and there is now a very clear program of work ahead of us for the delivery of that. That kicks off next week with the information management governance group being reformed and setting out our deliverables from that. There's, as you read in the report, a lot of work to be completed over the next year. Part of the objective piece of work that we've been doing has been around the process automation. And we're making some really good inroads around the automation of some of our very manual processes. So as you can see from the report there, there's a number underway, and that is helping with the manualness of some of those processes. And I suppose one of the ones that I like to highlight is the credit card approval. You know, that's a really robust process now. It makes it nice and easy for making a purchase, and it keeps all our records all in one place, and it's fully automated. There's the Connect Share folders, you know, obviously that's what supports our council papers and everything at the moment. And there's a big piece of work around the Lagoimas. They have been hard to manage with pieces of paper wandering around the organisation. So that's been completed, and the objective upgrade is happening in February. So that will bring along some user benefit to the organisation. Bring Data to Life is a pilot is underway. There's some very good imagery coming out of, there's a camera sitting up on the Reedy River at Lumsden, and we've seen the first lot of pictures that are coming out of that. So that looks like a really good, exciting picture, exciting project rather. And members of the idea is going to be that that'll be up on our website, and members of the public will be able to go in and have a look at various different rivers around the region and see what the rivers are doing. I can get a live stream, or near enough to live stream, probably every 15-30 minute update or something like that. So that's is underway at the moment, and the contact management project continues to be, you know, that battle of trying to keep our contacts up to date, and there's 35,000 contacts just in our IRIS database that we're working our way through and ensuring that, you know, we have minimal errors, and we've got protocols around those, and tying that into the rates database. You know, we've just sent out rates letters, so it's a perfect opportunity to be updating all of that detail, which flows on a little bit to our online services this year has had a really good uptake, particularly now that checks have gone. So there has been a massive increase in the number of people signing up, and I haven't quite got the numbers for those yet, signing up for direct debit, using our online services. So the upgrade that we did earlier in the year has benefited our customers. And so there's been a significant increase, if you see by that graph on page 74. The technology plan is progressing slowly. It's the ownership for that. It's with the IM strategy now complete, the technology plan is in its sort of drafting stage, and just due to a lack of resources, it's slightly behind schedule. We're not going to meet the December output of a draft for that, but we have spoke to Amy about it, and we've got a draft will be available by the end of January. And that will have that program of work that we'll be delivering, that'll come under the transformation budget, and with the change of resource and GMs and that, so that'll have more momentum in the new year. And that's really all that I had to report on that. Paula, do you wish to add anything?
I probably do actually. A wee bit around the information management strategy is that the strategy clearly defines the next 3 years program of work. The table that you've got actually in front of you actually is defining what's been happening in 2022 and how that work is actually progressing. I feel like we've actually got IM into a really nice space in the past 6 months, to be really honest. I feel like I've got really good support in that space. So having the IM strategy done and dusted by the end of this year has actually felt like quite a good accomplishment. So I'm quite happy about that. And I am happy to take any questions. Probably another thing just around the automations and objective is it's really important because that really helps us with our security and protecting privacy and our integrity to the record. So that's a really important piece for the automation in our systems. Thanks.
Thanks, Paula. Any
Can
questions? Oh, yes.
can I just add, sorry, one point before questions. So just building on the report of both Jane and Paula, I think historically we've not particularly nailed what information management was, and therefore to build on Paula's point, I think we are crystal clear about that now. We've got that really sharply in focus, and therefore we've been able to build a much more comprehensive and coherent plan to bring to council and to drive forwards and support the organisation with, now that it has been articulated, it's been really easy to lay out the foundations and the steps of the work that Paul's got here, and the plan that Jane's going to build from a digital point of view will really support that. Now, some of this is just about basic hygiene matters in relation to our information, but they're critically important for us as an organisation, for any organisation, but also because we are a local government organisation, we're governed by legislation around our record keeping. So our information management policy supports us in that, and our strategy, sorry, I should have said, supports us in the delivery of that as well. Some of the work that Jane has been talking about, with respect to automation, we talked earlier in council today about, being on purpose, it might have been about being more efficient and effective as an organisation, and also feeding in that being much more customer focused in the way in which we, collect data and turn that into useful information and make that available for the public and for others who may want to be using their data. Yeah. Thank you.
Any questions? I had one on page 74, the bar chart there on my online services. I see that the worries about winter grazing sort of totaled around about 1,200 or something like that over the 3 months, which looked quite good. There'd be maybe that would be a reasonable, pretty good proportion of people that would be doing winter grazing here. So that looks good, and it leads on to my other question about heading into the farm environment plan. We talked about this before, farm environment plan requirement, and whether or not we are gearing up or will have a capability for people to basically do their farm plans online with, suitable prompts and tips of how people can do it, and to enable people to do that more easily so that they're headed in the right direction, and also, we get an instant record of what they've got.
I'll answer that with I'll report back at the next meeting for that, because I've got a meeting sometime before Christmas. I've got an email in my mailbox that arrived yesterday on that. I believe that it is going to be a national solution. So like the NCAP was a national solution, that this will also be a national solution. So we're having standardisation across all regional councils so that we can have national reporting in the same way. So that's my belief in which the direction that it is travelling at the moment.
There is a lot of potential there, and people to pull up, a farm, an aerial photograph of their farm, which you can identify all sorts of areas where you can have a wetland or fence off a creek and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so that's that. And I was a part of a national NCAP meeting last week, and that's definitely, and so we're starting to talk about the environmental farm plan and where that's actually going to land. So I believe that it will land in a national.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well, so I did have a question. It was in a very similar vein around, and when those farm environment plans or environmental management plans, as what we envisaged with the regional forum recommendations, when they emerge, my question was kind of like, what level of support were we expecting from the centre, as opposed to how much was going to be left for us to manage at a regional level? Or is the ministry going to sort of come to the party to resource some of the extra?
Yeah, so unclear at this stage, but I'm hoping the answer will be yes, that they'll support it from a national point of view. But of course, there's always going to be regional questions. And so, and that's what we found with the NCAP as well, is that there's regional questions that came, you know, and there's been lots of learnings through that NCAP project. So that will certainly be carried forward. There's been a lessons learned session held already.
Thanks, Jane. Nicole, did you have anything?
Yes, well, there's been a lot of talk about a national data locker, and that still hasn't materialised yet. But that's the idea, is that regional councils or government could only access certain parts of your plan. And I know I was talking to one guy and I said, well, how can we protect that? And he said, we might be in the same bank, but he says, I hope you don't know my password. So I think it's doable. It's but the other thing is, you're talking about the map. We have a mapping tool that people can access on our website for winter grazing, which is a pretty good tool. They can pull up their paddock, put in the mitigation. So there's that sort of support coming from our side of the equation too.
Yeah, and Nicole, just on that, I think that Environment Southland is way ahead of most other regions in this space. So that we've had that tool available for 2 years. So that's been hence why it's getting so much coverage on our website, because it's actually been there for 2 years now.
Thanks, Jane. Lyndall.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Now that the IM is crystal clear for you, please continue to help us see it as crystal and clear as you are, because, not speaking for other people, but I would suspect that we all think something a little bit different is going on. So helping us with that would be good. And amongst that, actually, just that last point of yours, Jane, it would be really interesting to be able to compare ourselves to some of our peers and see where we're ahead of the game and where we're not, so that we know where we sit.
Yeah.
Because although we're not supposed to, compare our students with each other, we do.
Through you, Chair, sorry, to your point, we've got the meeting of the first meeting of the Information Management Governance Group next week. And on the agenda for that, which I just signed off a very short time ago, will be a conversation about how we brief council on the information management strategy and what it means. So absolutely, yes. And I know, like, historically, it's not been well understood or articulated. And I'm really proud. I think we're all really proud to be able to bring this piece of work to you, share it, and then to do the work to improve our systems and our data capability actually to this group and to our broader public.
If I can, Chairman, I think it would be fair to say that actually some of the feedback that we get as councillors is, seems to relate to how we manage our information and what access people have got to things and what we've got as a council have got access to and all that stuff. So a better understanding, I think, is probably really good. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Sort of related to that, may or may not be, I get emails from Microsoft Viva. I think. Does that ring a bell? Tells me what I've got on today.
Yes.
Is that good?
I like it. As an Office 365, and it's quite easy to turn them off if you've accidentally done it. But I actually like it because it tells me which meeting I've got and what papers all belong to that meeting. So
no excuse me, no.
Well, if you want that, see Jane, sure she's got to have it. Even though you've got
yeah, but no, I mean, certainly next year is looking exciting for bringing this all together. It has felt like a bit of a long journey, but we are at long last getting there.
Thank you, and thank you, Paula. Did you want to add anything else? Right.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for helping us with that, and thank you, Jane. I think you've probably got a motion there to make that report. Jeremy and Wendell. Thank you very much, and thank you again for and all those in favour of that recommendation, please say aye.
Yeah.
Right, there's nothing to be held in public excluded, so I'll declare the meeting closed, and thank you for your participation and.
Very much.
Very good.
Thank you. Well,